I'd like to welcome you to this new episode of What Makes You Think That You Can, episode 76. Welcome, Dominique. Thank you for your time and thank you for coming.
Hey, good afternoon. Great to be here.
Welcome, welcome. Before we go into the real conversation, if I can say, we'll start with a few questions to introduce yourself.
Hmm.
We in for 40, 45 minutes conversation. Unless you in the crowd watching this live wants to interact with us and have questions, comments, so that Dominique can answer. We have a really hard stop at 3 max, so today there's no extra.
And you chose today to invite me.
Well, I'll manage. I'll manage to the best of my ability.
Challenge
Um,
accepted.
Absolutely. Let's go. So again, as discussed, those are just questions to to have you talk, share a little bit of your knowledge, experience, and wisdom. If you don't want to go there, you just let me know and we move on. First one, please. Your place of birth.
All right. So I was born in Kinshasa, in the
All
Congo.
right. All right.
I arrived here when I was 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I grew up in a small village, but yeah, I was born in Africa. Yeah.
All right. Now, triggering questions for many people. Where's home?
I know. It's an odd one, and I've thought a lot about it. And I think, and I'll explain why, I think I'm going to say Brussels. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason for this is because I grew up in this small village and there wasn't a lot of representation, it wasn't diverse. Brussels was the first time in my life where I felt like I could belong, like I could see people like me. And that really, really started something for me in terms of,
Okay.
starting my journey through my identity. Yeah.
All right. All right. The last one to introduce yourself, please. You don't need to do three, but which is or which are some of the aspects of your personality identity
Yeah.
important to you.
Okay. Well, actually, I do have 3. One would be to be a community organizer. So it's with the activism, with with building a community of people that are like me, going through similar experiences and building something together. The
Mhm.
second is being with my L&D background, being sort of a trainer, educator, career coach, all of that. So the community stuff is really around the anti-racism and all that, and then you have like the career stuff. So it's 2 things that sometimes collide, which
Mhm.
is interesting as well. And then I'm a mom, and that's something that's also very important in what I represent and what I talk about, because what you were once maybe willing to put up with for yourself, are you willing to accept it for your children as well? So
Mm.
that's a whole debate as well. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that because that was one point that I took a mental note that I want to have your reaction on, and you just say it. We will talk about this in the coming minutes, but one thing that I noticed, the feedback that I received, especially in corporate Brussels and Belgium, is the fact that quite a few people awakened after George Floyd murder and said, "No, this time I won't be silenced anymore, and especially I don't want it for my children. I had it for me, okay, fine, but I don't want it for my children. It has to change." So, thank you for that. And if you remember, in case I lose it again, and you want to touch upon it, that will be great.
But if you allow me to add something, because I wanted to kind of react on the initial question you asked about the
Mm,
cynicism.
yes.
And you know what? If I were to respond to that question, to answer that question for myself, I'd say I kind of am to some extent. I can't say like I'm not cynical at all. There is a part of you that's like, yeah, same old, or along those lines. But coming back to the point about the children, are you just going to take no for an answer? Are you just going to just lie down? And because then what's the point? And you choose life for yourself and for your children. You choose to fight another battle. And that's kind of how you navigate through, something like cynicism, but at the same time, still choosing to go on.
Mm, absolutely. The last one, which is the link to the topic of our conversation today is about your journey, but more specifically, what about Black by Us? What made you think that you could start this, and what is Black by Us in a nutshell?
So it really was around starting to, some of the things that were in different pockets of my life, in different communities. It was really around recentering. This idea of unity is very, very key, in a way that I think, in a way that I see the way forward. This idea of pulling together. We see that a lot of the systems are actually causing us to feel isolated, to feel weaker, and in unity we find a lot of strength. And so also the ability to kind of define is the self-determination. It's, that's why the by us. So it's like, okay, our community, how we start having a dialogue and talking about the things that are important to us and concern us, in a way that, I mean, so that we do it. Like, it's in the same
Mm,
way that, do you want issues about women to be discussed exclusively and decided exclusively by men? No, you want people to be able to, self determine their lives. And that's kind of the idea there. Create a community where we can talk about the things that are important to us, and also celebrate those things and make each other strong. It's giving each other strength through that.
absolutely, and I thank you that you're doing this, and that somehow I was able to take part with one of the many debates, exchanges, interactions that you organize and that you will organize again. A quick shout out to Claire for connecting both of us. Obviously, that was a good look from her, and voila. So thank you for that. And now comes the question about the title of our conversation. Why did you choose this title, and what does that mean, please?
Yeah,
White
intriguing.
recommended Black resilience.
Absolutely. And it's kind of taking a look back at the past 2 years, and everything that we've experienced as a society, in terms of communities, individually, as we've seen. So you mentioned, obviously, the murder of George Floyd, which acted as a catalyst in society, when all of a sudden a lot of people were seeing the things we've always known in the community, but weren't resonating, and all of a sudden everybody was seeing it. You felt seen, right? So that
Mhm.
is what I call the great white awakening. I'm not the only one calling it that, but it's what we mean by white awakening. Is like, suddenly white people were open to seeing what those experiences were and what the impact of systemic racism is. And so this generated a lot of hope in the community, that
Mm,
finally, as you're being seen, the next step is action and change and improvement.
mm,
And why do I connect it with Black resilience? Because over the course of our lives, we've seen, through different events, various windows of opportunities, small ones, that sometimes there is a discussion happening, a dialogue starting, but the window is closing every time. With this one, it felt different. It
mhm.
felt like more. It felt powerful. It was all over the world,
Yes.
and you were sort of carried with, by that. And it gave, as I said, a lot of hope and expectations.
Hmm.
And why do I link it with resilience? Because, to this, in the same way that we've had to adjust to, like, hope, no, yes, no, maybe this time, the more you lean into the hope, the more think of the elastic band, right? Like, the more you stretch, like, when you have to go back, are you able to go back? Are we, maybe did we for once allow ourselves to really lean into this hope, and you know
Mm,
getting to that with this level of consciousness, you have to think about all the things we've internalized in the course of our lives. So many things that, in order to just exist and survive and fit in, we have to internalize a number of things: codes at work, in society, a way that we behave, a way that we show up in the world, in order to fit in. And a number of things we have to put up with, in terms of humor, in terms of representations on TV, in the media, in the movie, whatever. all the things we internalize and the behaviors of others towards us as well. And we sort of accept them as the standard, as the norm, in order for us to continue to carry on with our activities and our lives. So now that we get to this level, all of that is happening somewhat subconsciously in a way.
Mhm.
But then once you allow yourself to get to that level of consciousness, we've realized a lot of the internalized stuff. And I know not all of us are on the same level in our
Yes.
journeys, right?
Yes.
Um, some of us have been already, going through this awakening themselves, this reckoning themselves for a long time. Some, this was the catalyst. George Floyd was really the catalyst, and they
Yeah.
realized, to your point, no more.
Yes.
I want something different, right?
Yep.
And then over time, as maybe the attention, the focus of the white community started to fade out, what do we do with all that hope? What do we do with
Mm.
all those expectations as that window is finally starting to
To
close?
close or is closed.
Is that's well,
We'll,
that's
we'll
certainly
see.
more. But
We'll
there is a
see.
trend, definitely. It's not going towards more attention. It's not going
Absolutely not.
towards more focus. You see a lot of fatigue with white people
Hmm.
with this topic. Are you still talking about that? We've changed now. It's all better. It's we're post post that.
Yep.
But so that requires a lot of resilience for Black people to navigate that, to really think about how are we going to manage ourselves through that, and to the point we were making earlier, are we okay with being cynical and just accepting that fact and accepting that's what it is, we're never changing it, and that's it, we're bitter? Or do we choose to fight one more battle
Hmm.
and continue? That's my point.
I really thank you for that. I mean, you gave a lot that we will need to unpack a little bit in the time that we have left. Um, Many things that I wanted to say, but I try to stay.
Mm,
Um, when I'm thinking about the conversation that I had this morning, and I'm really thankful for the honesty and the integrity of that person, um, living in Belgium, by the way, who told me about being cynical. I'm not sure that it's about being um, like having a bad taste in your mouth and no, it's coming to a realization that let me say this thing differently. I had this. So 2 years after George Floyd, that was basically the post that I put on LinkedIn, and the many statements,
mm,
pledges, comments, etc. What has changed? What has not changed? And where do we go from here? Obviously, my lens is through corporate, but this is bigger than just corporate. I do agree. Oh, by the way, the only person that I've seen in Belgium, I may have missed, I'm sure I've missed, I hope I have missed many other communications, but the only top executive, top manager that I've seen posting a message in Belgium was the CEO. I will call him out. I will say it. The only one that I've seen was the CEO of UCB in Belgium. I may have missed other ones,
mhm.
but he's the only one that I've seen posting a message on LinkedIn about after the murder of George Floyd and how diversity matters, blah, 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 blah. All the other ones that
You mean immediately after the
got,
events? Okay.
all the other ones that I've seen were basically copying, pasting the black box, black square coming from the
Right.
US.
No, there have been, and
Okay,
that's also kind of my point here, Gregory, is that there have been a lot of there's there's been a lot of thought in some organizations to really
okay,
kind of create some meaning of all this, and to really find a way that's authentic to communicate on it. I think that all of this willingness, all of this goodwill, is challenged by another type of resilience. You remember we talked about yesterday. We talked about the fact that when we talk about Black resilience, we need to be resilient, right? As
yeah,
Black people, white supremacy is resilient too.
absolutely.
All the systems that have been there for many, many, many years. It's hard to shake. It's really
Centuries.
hard to shake. So even with the best heart and the best intentions, it is really hard to change all of that. So what it
Mhm.
requires is a lot of intention, commitment, and consistency, and to make some very, very concrete plans to make
Yes.
it happen, right?
Yes.
This is otherwise the wave is too strong. The wave is
Yes.
just too
True.
strong.
True. True. And that's what the person was. That's what this person was communicating to me this morning. It was basically just to say, I come to the realization that the foundation, those dynamics, just like to say, coming from centuries, are so strong. Basically, it won't change.
Mm.
That's coming. So that's the cynical part. Is coming to the realization that yes, I tried to push for change. I tried to talk to many people, white people included, and I come to the realization that you've read this book. I'm trying to,
Yeah.
right. Why I'm no longer talking about race to white people is just at a certain moment I don't have to waste my time anymore, and I will try to waste or at least put my energy to the black community, the black town, the black people, and try to heal us. So that will
Yeah.
be the second part of our conversation. So
Hmm.
that was more the realization and what I'm taking from that conversation. Especially when you open up, you let your guard down at that moment. You express things that you were blocking inside of yourself, and then suddenly it's about, yeah, you know what, move on. Okay, stop with this. We have other priorities now. We need to do something else. So in a nutshell, if you can break down the title now, we go
Yeah.
piece by
Okay.
piece.
Yeah.
What is white awakening?
Okay. So awakening, as in like becoming awake, as in realizing some things. To my point, to my earlier point, things that within the Black community we've known, we've been seeing those events, we have lived experiences ourselves. I think
Hmm.
I don't know one Black person who does not have a story of some sort of discrimination, or of having had to deal with it. Not all of us choose to fight, not all of us choose to make it an issue in our lives, whether that's, you know, I don't know what coping mechanism this is, but it's on each of us to decide what we want to do with it. That's true. But in any case, right? What happened after, with George Floyd, was that suddenly, as we were saying earlier, a lot of white people, I think, faced with those images that are just like we say in French, sans appel. There's no way to argue that. This
You
is
can't
what you
deny it.
see. You can't deny it. That's what you see. This is brutal. There's just no explaining it away. Like, it's brutal.
Hmm.
And so people saw it, saw this violence, and they could not deny it anymore. Um, One issue I do have with that, I mean, because the George Floyd, the whole movement just created more attention. People were more willing and open to listen to some of the effects of systemic racism. A lot of people were actually quite open to exploring how they may participate unwillingly to some, systemic issues.
Teach
And
me,
how, excuse me?
teach me, tell me, give me,
Yes, yeah,
me,
there was a lot of
give me
people.
books, give
Yeah,
me
yeah, yeah.
videos.
People were reading books and trying to understand how their white privilege was playing a role in all of it. But one thing that is an issue, I think, is the fact that with the focus on the violence, right, you
Hmm.
still sort of looking at racism, and I think in countries like Belgium is very, very important, and France as well, is that in looking at the racism as the brutal, violent acts and the sort of out, the very, very blunt, very
The
brutal
hatred.
racism, the hatred, voila, you you quite conveniently don't look at all of the polite stuff, all of the subtle stuff that's actually causing our society to be the way that it is, which is not very inclusive, which is causing the lack of access to housing, employment, all of those things. Those are not necessarily people spitting in each other's faces or calling each other names.
Or beautiful racism in Belgium, like one told me one day.
Exactly. So I think this is where people are saying, well, we fought for, of course people can't die, we don't want people to die. But then, like, are we making enough connections? And because probably the issue of race, the topic of race, isn't maybe as we don't have as much maturity in terms of the discussing these issues in our society here in Belgium, compared to maybe Anglo-Saxon countries, um, to 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 really understand that no, you can't stop at the violence. You have to look at all of the systemic things. And the number of European countries that just basically decided that no, there isn't any systemic racism in our country. I remember
Mhm.
even like a report, even in the UK, like they basically issued a government report saying no, there's no systemic racism in
Right.
the UK. And you think, wow,
Right.
we're not ready as
Right.
a country to even look at that. But then, as long as you're dancing around the issue, you can't really, fix it, right?
Sure.
So,
And
in a nutshell, the white awakening is this point at this point in time with George Floyd, where white people were realizing a number of things they weren't seeing before, or maybe they weren't ready, or they weren't accepting or acknowledging before. All of a sudden, society as a whole was looking at it, was paying attention to it. Does it have anything to do with the pandemic? Maybe people are stuck at home, they don't have anything to watch. They don't have
sure.
anything to do, then read, social networks and stuff like that. They're not
Sure.
distracted by their daily lives. Maybe the pandemic played a role, but that was,
It did.
basically a moment in time where suddenly white people were paying attention to racism.
Like some people said, the perfect storm,
Yeah,
all combinations at the same time, and
yeah,
this was it.
that led them to acknowledge racism.
I
And
like
so, yeah,
before we still have to go to the second
of
part of
course,
the title, but quickly remember this book
yeah,
by John Graham.
yeah,
Okay, The Plantation Theory. I've listened to a podcast on Clubhouse that is organizing, I think, on a weekly basis. So I listened to that last weekend. Whew. And this part attached to White Awakening, where I would like you to, two things where I would like you to comment on before we move to the Black Resilient piece. So, first, already I'm quoting this from his book, Plantation Theory by John Graham, the contract. The contract that each one of us sign when entering the corporate space. And one of the conditions, or the conditions, because I still have to read the whole book, I just started, is that, well, we are the basement. We get the keys to the basement in terms of the hierarchy on the plantation, which is somehow the hierarchy that we can see. It is still many institutions for them in the USA, also applicable to us in our context in Belgium. So, based on that, just to give that intro, in that conversation, in that podcast on Clubhouse, people were reacting, etc., etc. And they mentioned the white comfort piece. And that's also something that I wanted to react on based on what you just said before. Maybe it's also part of the condition, those dynamics of why changes are not happening, because at a certain moment we read the room, we learn to read the room, some of us more than others, etc., etc. And basically, what I heard a few candidates tell me is human resources managers telling them, to Africans and Black people, it's like, be happy, you have a job,
mm-hmm.
so keep quiet. So from there, it's the white comfort that to not being pushed, or at least seeing the consequences, the dynamics of everything that's happening, and that there are other people with different life experiences than yours. Right? So I don't know if you feel like commenting on what
No,
what
I
what do
mean,
you feel about the white comfort piece? And obviously, yes, I'm not a racist. That's the thing that I have with my friends.
yeah, it's again, it's this convenient definition of a racist being an overt
Yeah.
aggression, violence, or insults.
Yes. Yes.
And that makes you very comfortable in thinking you are not a racist. Now, I don't want to say everybody's a racist. What I do want to say, and it was interesting, I think it was on Red Table Talk, Will Smith's wife, she has a talk show on TV, and one of the ladies there was saying something like, so why do you ask us basically to be responsible or accountable for what our ancestors did?
Mm.
And the lady said, as long as I have to suffer the consequences of what my ancestors had to go through, I will hold you accountable for what your ancestors did. And I thought this was, I mean, it's food for thought, right? It's really thinking you want to be free of that, yet we can't be free of the consequences of everything that happened, of colonialism in the US, slavery, you know, we
Yes.
each have our context, but the reality is to this day, we're living the consequences
Yes.
of how the colonial views shaped the way the world looks at Black people nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
right? It really was shaped, in colonial times to really, this whole philosophy, this whole the way that you look, the way that you define, the way that you look at Black people's intelligence and just their place in society. This was all intentionally shaped for political reasons,
Yes.
right? And we're still to this day seeing the consequences of that in society. And that's a reality we can't shake, whether we want to or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
The last piece, and then we go to Black resilience. Also coming from the clubhouse conversation about the plantation theory is there was a lot of discussions around this. Executives in the USA saying, "Yeah, we're not ready yet." So when John is going to consult with companies and top executives, that's the reaction. We are not ready yet, which is somehow to me, if I put it in the context of Belgium with my experience over the last 2 years, Gregory, we do not find that. Um, okay, how are you reflecting on your practices? How are you reflecting on your policies? And where do you go to find the talent? Where do you go to find the suppliers? Where do you go to find your clients, etc., etc., etc.? Then maybe you should open up to new dimensions and new ways of doing things. So that was really for me the connection that I was trying to
It's the
make.
same with the laws, huh? It's the same with the laws. Oh, European laws are forbidding us from recruiting, specifically people of color, or training specifically people of color, giving them like opportunities. It's comfortable to hide behind those things. It
Okay.
all comes down to intention and motivation. If you want to find a way, you'll find a way. In Europe, you can actually work with external, if anybody's watching us and doesn't know this, even though you can't go and like make specific demographics about ethnicity in your company, you can work with an external company who is going to just give you an overview without giving you any sort of
Details.
what do you say, like confidential private information, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
completely compliant with the law, yet giving you, maybe it's not perfect, but it's giving you some insight, and you might just be able to start working on something through that.
Absolutely. Now, the second
Yeah,
piece of the title and the conversation, the Black resilience.
yeah,
Would you
yeah,
break it down, please?
yeah, absolutely. So really, Black resilience. This resilience is something Black people have had to have, since the beginning of times, because you have to put up with a number of things, yet you have to carry on. You have to, get up every single day and, live to fight another battle.
Mm.
So this is something that we've all had to do. Now, resilience gets harder the more, the more emotional it gets and the more real it gets. To me, the more you lean into this vulnerability, we shared so much in the past 2 years. We opened up, we shared our experiences, we things we probably were not really going into so much because it's easier to go on with your day if you don't actually think about those things, right?
The
Yet here,
pains.
to help society educate itself, a lot of us actually shared a lot of our lives,
Hmm.
right? In the hope that it could help us grow, all of us, And so it gets really difficult, to think, okay, how do you get back into that box? How do you
Mm.
forget about all that hope and, carry on as if nothing happened? It's nearly impossible. And I argue that a lot of us will never be able to do that. So where do we go from that, right? It's really thinking. I mean, some of us continue to fight within the system, to think, okay, if I'm there, how can I bring some change, even
Yes.
small change, incremental gain, right?
Yes.
To within the system. And again, I want to be really clear that I don't want to judge those that cannot or don't want to. When you said like the basement keys and the contract you sign, we all have to feed our families, pay our rent, and it's not fair to judge somebody who's just, as
No,
long as
it's
you're
not
not
judging you.
pushing
Just be aware. Just be
exactly,
aware.
as long as you're not pushing your neighbor under a train, like you do what you need to do to survive,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
um but some of us choose to be more vocal and to try and bring about some change, and that's okay. But I do think one of the things that is so key is within the community, what you can do within the communities, right?
Mm-hmm.
um Thinking about how you create networks to support one another, right?
Mm.
Recommend each other for opportunities. Think of it.
Mm.
Who said there was only spot for one person, a spot for one person? Who? Why is it that we feel like we have to compete with one another? Because the
Deep question.
scarcity of opportunities.
Deep question.
Okay, but we can change that. How are we creating opportunities ourselves? Some people are more and more, owning their own businesses, starting their own businesses, black-owned businesses, and
Yes.
creating their own opportunities. Right. So if
Yes.
people aren't going to give you a job, I see this in a lot of young creatives as well. Who are, well, if I'm not going to get hired, I don't know if you know Ibrahim Kamara in the UK, the founder of Guap
Nope.
UK, which is like a super hot online platform now, working with the hottest brands. He has you need to check out the TED Talk, where he talks about how he was being always refused for every job he applied for.
Mm.
People were telling him he was not a good communicator. Funny enough, now he runs a communication platform. But but the point
Mm.
is, he chose to create his own opportunity, right? If
Yes.
that's not going to work otherwise.
Yes.
So that's a possibility to do that. But I really think that building each other up, elevating each other, mentoring each other, coaching each other, giving each other strengths is really, really key. Um, I think also to kind of root ourselves in Black joy and what,
Black joy.
yeah, a Black joy. So, what is Black joy, first of all? Is the celebration of Black excellence, of positive representations.
Mm-hmm.
Surrounding yourself with positive representations, affirming representations is key. We see so much of, I mean, we had long conversations about some documentaries we saw recently, that portrayed a certain aspect of what it is, to
To
be
be
Black,
black.
which was more on the side of the victimization. And you didn't see a lot of, the success, the affirmation. And so it's really important to have positive representations. If you are a parent, having your kids read some books with characters that look like them, that are
Yes.
strong, positive characters, not the poor child who was abandoned or
Yes.
something, like really something that they can build themselves and their identity and their self-confidence, just like all the other kids in the world are able to
And
do.
others
At
too,
least
by the way.
white
Others
kids,
too
right?
can benefit from that for
I
that.
mean,
From that.
go to a toy store and try to find
Mm-hmm.
toys that represent people of color. It's quite hard. I mean, there's
Yes.
more of it now, but it's quite hard. And
Yes.
so the archetypical family, the perfect family, the perfect woman, the perfect
Mm.
man, the perfect children are always portrayed around Eurocentric norms. And
Yes.
so this is something, make no mistake, the kids, they internalize that. They do from
Absolutely.
a very young age, and you carry that through your entire life. So the more we can surround ourselves with those affirming images, affirming representations of Blackness, the more we can also be rooted in that. And so why to do that is because actually the whole point of oppression is to keep people down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So for you to choose joy anyway, it's basically saying, right? I'm
Got
not
it.
going to say the words. You know what I mean?
Got it.
It's resistance. It's an act of resistance. When people want you to be down, laugh, be happy, celebrate things. that's an act of resistance, and it's a really strong, powerful, affirming thing to do.
Instead of going for hatred or
Yeah,
hate, you go for love.
yeah.
When, like
And so
someone say, when they go low,
you go high. Yeah.
yes,
But strengths also, and that's something that, I mean, I kind of also draw from my work in learning and development, and thinking about how, when somebody wants to excel, you tell them, look at what your strengths are and build on that. And
yes,
so we look at our community, we and the rest of the world tends to look at what we lack, or what's
yes.
difficult. And what about building on our strengths, individual and collective strengths, right? And really
Hmm.
kind of thrive through that. Those
Hmm.
are also things that we can look at.
Um, one question that I got since this morning
Mm,
after I had that call, and I think maybe I shared it with you, or I shared it on the tweet when I retweeted the post that you had for to announce this live. I was wondering if having these conversations are triggering to some of us, regarding racial trauma, regarding all kind of trauma and issues.
mm,
And I really hope, I don't know the answer to that question, to be honest. I hope not. That's not the intention. On the contrary, it's about maybe starting with having a space to discuss this, because I wasn't seeing that, at least in my network. Um, and also reason why I wanted to have those conversations, especially for the younger people, the younger professionals, the students, etc., to get some keys of understanding of what's happening. Especially one young person told me, a young professional told me, Gregory, already when you have your parents next to you, when you have a support system, it is difficult. Now imagine for those of us without the supporting system, without parents who understand the corporate game, how can they move forward? So especially for those young people that I had this in mind, because I'm also looking at some of my friends. Well, today you can say when you look from the outside in, they are successful, but they had really hard and some humble beginnings. Whereas today they own their own place, they go on vacations, they
mm.
have those corporate jobs, they have families, but they're still dealing with some of the hurt and the pain and the trauma, even though they on the other side of the tunnel, if I can say. But they don't want to speak about this. They don't want to go about this because they don't want to look at the wounds somehow. They don't want to look at the pain.
And
So
I can understand. I can understand this to some extent, because if you think of the concept of generational trauma, is how we
mm,
carry with us the scars of what the generations before have had to endure, right? And
yes,
it's the same for some family issues. It doesn't always have to do with race, right? But sometimes it's,
yes,
it's family trauma. But still, this is something you pass on to your kids, in the way that if you're always alert, if you're always alert to racial issues, like say in school somebody said this, and you're always kind of like,
mm,
as a parent, you're kind of like also triggering your kid to respond to those situations, right? And
yes,
some parents just want um, maybe like a fresh start for their kids, and maybe not kind of
with that
ruin
burden.
their innocence, ruin their innocence, give them that burden of that trauma. I mean, I go back and forth on this, but I do think that sooner or later, I mean, the world's not about to change drastically from now to
For
tomorrow.
sure not.
So sooner or later, those kids are going to be um, just finding themselves sort of confronted with, with the world, with
Sure.
racism, and so they need to be somehow expecting it. You need to prepare them. You need to prepare them.
It's a tough
It's a
one.
balancing act. It's a really tough balancing act. How do you prepare them yet give them all of the self-love and confidence and affirmation that they need in order to not let all of that knock them down?
Mm.
It's really hard. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that episode that I did with Olivier Nanga, and I remember Olivier Nanga told me about um, if you ever saw it, the episode of Venus Williams with her father, with the interview with a journalist.
Mm.
You never
No,
saw that one?
I don't think so.
When the father protected Venus
Uh,
during the interview, you never saw that piece?
no, I don't think
I,
so.
I'll share it with you. Oh,
Okay.
definitely, you have to see it. And basically, he was protecting her confidence, not only her self image, but the confidence that she was building up. She was still a teenager at the
Yeah.
time to say, I will take on the challenge and become the number one and become the champion. So that confidence has a black female. The father saw that game and he protected her, and that was just amazing. And I think that's I'm talking about this following what you were saying is the give and take about preparing the next generations, especially kids, but at the same time, still allowing them to be kids while they're still kids.
Mm.
And that's the tough one.
Yeah.
From this morning, I had this again, taking that from that conversation this morning, and you already touched upon this. I discovered this term, this concept. I didn't know about this epigenetics. Thank you. You made me learn something this morning. And you just talk about generational trauma. It's in line. And the question that, or at least the constraint that that person has today is about how do we take care of ourselves?
Mm. Yeah.
And
I
I was
mean,
asked this question: how do we take care of
yeah.
ourselves individually and collectively?
That's really, I think, the key, and it boils down to, some a part of the our ability to be resilient is also to kind of look at what do we control. You can't control the reaction of the society, of the company you apply for, of the white people around you, your friends who are being triggered or feel, expressing
Hmm.
some white fragility. You can't really control that. What you can control is your response. What you can control is how you take care of yourself to be
Hmm.
so that you can be stronger. In the same way, you need to sleep, eat well, in order
Yeah.
for your body to function and your brain to function. Is the same thing. You take care of your mental well-being, you take
Yeah.
care of your soul, you take care of your body as well. And so it's why the joy is so key. It's why
Hmm.
the joy is so key. You need to root yourself into that. You need to also allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. If you're feeling sad, if you're feeling triggered, you need to allow
Yes.
yourself those emotions. You
Yes.
can't just repress them, because guess what? They'll show up one way or
Hmm.
another, usually in the wrong, the worst possible situation.
Yes.
But yeah, no,
Yes.
it's really about, to me, like joy, celebrating, joyful representation for your kids. I cannot tell you how much I talk to my kids around, I mean, obviously reading inclusive books, telling them about, so my little boy is 6, my oldest is 6, and he's starting to, come home and say, oh, I want to marry so and so from my class. and and then I started to think, is there a pattern in his affinity? And I was
Mm,
like, talking to him about all the beauty, like all the women, and celebrating all of this
mm,
diversity in different ways to be beautiful. And he gets it, because it's like, Mama, you're big, but you're so beautiful. That's what makes you beautiful. And so I know he gets it. And yeah, it's continuously, rooting ourselves and enjoying and surrounding our families
mm.
with those affirming representations is
Yes.
very key for
Yes.
self-care.
We will be landing. I told you 1 hour maximum. Already the 45 minutes are gone,
Yeah.
but we will finish in due time. In case you have reaction questions for Dominique, it's now is the moment for you. And just before I ask you the 3 or 4 questions that I have left for you is, I'd like you to tell me something. I took a mental note of this when we were talking, but you did not approach it yet, I think. You said that resilience is different than strength. It's
Mm,
not just about I'm strong or I have to be strong. Mm-mm. Apparently, you said it was different than that.
it is
So how
different.
different?
So strength is powering through no matter what. And think of it as like you have like a stick of wood or whatever, and
Hmm.
you pull, it breaks. Resilience is like, what do you say, Roseau? Like, it's like when you have these um I don't know the word in English, funny enough, for roseau, but it's
Same for
basically
me.
those. It's more flexible, and
Yes.
it means that if you apply it, it won't break. It will just like do like this, and then it will go back
Come
into
back
its
to its
initial
form.
position. And
Yes.
that's what resilience is about. In order to build your resiliency, you have to work on your stamina for sure, and being able to
Mm-hmm.
sustain the difficulty over time. But you need to build in the recovery. You need to have
Okay.
a safe space. You need to take care of yourself. You need to rest. You need to have spiritual a spiritual safe space as well. You do need to do that. You cannot
Body, mind,
sustain this
spirit.
over time. Yeah, just the strength is not enough, and
Okay.
it's not healthy for you.
Okay.
Mm.
You talked about mentoring before.
Yep.
I'd like you to react on this one,
Because
please.
yeah, because mentoring is a hot topic in organizations. Namely, mentoring is often basically seen as a senior executive sharing their experience with a more junior employee. And what we've seen, and it's actually the case for women and Black people, are women and people of color are over mentored and under sponsored. So we society likes to tell them what they should do, and then I teach them a lot. But then when it comes to time to give opportunities,
Mm,
this is where women and people of color are underserved.
yes.
So the first thing also I would say is that I so appreciate the mentoring of senior executives because they have a lot to share. They have a great understanding of organizations. I also think that learning from somebody who has had similar experiences or can understand your journey as a person of color, there's an element. I mean, a part of that a white person can never understand how it is for you as a person of color to navigate the workplace, even school. I mean, we can have another separate conversation about
Mm-hmm.
school, uh, but um,
Mm-hmm.
but so the point is, like, learning from somebody. Once, first of all, it's affirming to see somebody who's made it, because
Yes.
you can
Important.
mentor me
Yes.
all you want, but if I can never see somebody that
Yes.
looks like me that actually has made it, it's
Yes.
still like wishful thinking, right? Whereas if I
Yes.
see somebody who's made it and I can learn from their experiences, I can learn how they navigated, their careers in the workplace through
Yes.
their identity. It's really powerful. And so, yeah, and sponsoring this is something that within organizations or even, across our relationships and our networks, putting each other forward for opportunities. It's just like
Yeah.
what you give, you get back.
Yes. Um, Based on these two things, I want to share about the mentoring piece. I recently had that experience by connecting a young professional to one of my friends. So it was like in private mode, you know. So it was a question about career choices,
Hmm.
two jobs, two different organizations, industries, etc., and which one to take. With one having a better pay upfront than the other one. So for someone who's money oriented, you're like, okay, which one do I take? And it happened that I have one of my friends working in one of these industries. So I said, you know what? I will connect you to someone already ahead on this journey. They both talk. And at the end of the conversation, my friend goes and the young person, the other friend, the younger one called me and said, Gregory, I need to tell you something. I'm like, what? He says, the first time that I've seen a black body, a black person at that position in my field, I would have never imagined, I could not imagine for me to go there because I never see it. I've never seen it. And is the first one that I see. So thank you very much. And so I hear it so many times about the importance of role models and seeing
So
before you
important.
believe it. But that was for me I
It
experienced
was the
this.
proof, like it was really that this feedback. But I mean, there's a great TED talk by a lady, American lady, Valerie Alexander. She's a scientist, but she's just explaining how her talk is about unconscious bias. But she there's a section of her talk that talks about how if you take the example of, say, like a very very racist family, in the US, whatever, very racist.
Mm-hmm.
The kids there who grew up under Obama, it doesn't matter how much hate was spoken in their homes,
Okay.
it's within the realm of possibility for them
Okay.
that a black man can be president. And
Yes.
so, in the same way, in that negative context, it's true. It's also true for, positive and affirming situations. So
Mm-hmm.
now that you see it's possible, it's within the realm of possibility for you, and you can better sort of
Mm-hmm.
project yourself. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying it's impossible, and that's the argument that a lot of people are making to say, well, some manage, but like, do we all have to be
Yes.
the greatest inventor? Do we all have to be, extraordinary in order to just make it?
Yes.
Right? I mean, not all of us are geniuses in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that if you see something as possible, see a glimpse of it,
Yes.
it gives you just the resources to pursue it.
And obviously, from a corporate standpoint, doing mentoring is important for sure, but it's not
Absolutely.
enough.
No.
It's not enough. It's not
Yeah,
because you have
the
that
sponsoring is key.
you're
Mm,
not working on the fabric of the company, the structure piece. So
mm.
mentoring is not about the structural piece, and you still have to work on the structural piece next to that. Yeah, obviously. The next piece that I have for you before I let you go, would you have some tips on branding and networking
Yeah.
for the people watching, please?
So I would say, and this coming back to strengths, because this is where you shine. So there's, even if
Mm,
it's small, even if it's something that you don't think anything of, it is, if it's something that you're strong in, you can build it, and actually you have unlimited possibilities when it comes to working on your strengths. You have unlimited possibilities. There's actually research on that, right, showing that if you work on developing something that's already a strength for you, you're going to be
mm,
really reaching amazing results. So really, your gateway to shining and your gateway to excellence is building on your strengths and finding what's really specific about you, finding your niche, finding how you, in your very own particular way, are bringing value and making an impact. And so, why am I talking about that in the context of networking? Is that the way that you influence somebody into being an ally for you is in the way that you're able to communicate the value that you can bring to this person, right?
mm-hmm.
This is, you can't just come to people, and I think a lot of people are making this mistake when they have to network, when they need an advice or help, they go then to a person and ask, and it feels it doesn't feel nice, right, when you're the recipient of that, because you feel like this person is only calling me when they need something.
Yes.
um Whereas if you're nurturing relationships, right, you're actually bringing value to people, build and nurture those relationships in that network,
Mm-hmm.
then it can really start to create opportunities for you. And definitely, you're also, especially when you think of those people in higher positions that are in those rooms where where the opportunities are being discussed and you're not there, right? What do you
Yeah.
want them to say about you? So
Mm-hmm.
show up, show your value. Personal branding is key. So show off your brand, live your brand in everything you do, in every way that you show up. I always tell people about which picture are you choosing for your LinkedIn. I mean, I'm not saying this you shouldn't. I'm just saying you should be aware of what it says about you. If that's what you want to say, awesome,
Yes.
but be intentional.
Know yourself, be aware of your values, be intentional.
Yeah.
Okay. The last two pieces, quick reaction on this. I rather have a small commitment that sustains the test of time than big statements and nothing happens or changes.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Fully agree with that. It's incremental gains, right? It's uh it's actually, if you have a plan and you're consistent and you're committed, and you make small progress, progress. It's like it's small grains of sand that makes the
Mm,
biggest thing. So really believe it, because those big statements, if they are not really grounded in some real commitment, but beyond the commitment, it's like It's like in the same way, as I told you, a learning and development professional. And so in the same way, you tell people, if you build your personal development plan and you just say, oh, I want to develop my presentation skills, but then you don't build a plan and every day or every week have something very concrete that you're going to do. And if you don't commit to spending the time and working on your development, what do you hope is
Mhm.
going to happen at the end of the year? You'll
Yes.
have your paper, it's nice, and you're not anywhere closer to your goal. And
Yes.
it's this exact same way. So are you willing, because it comes down to that, right? Are you willing to put in the work? Are you willing to put in the time and the
Yes.
money to make some change happen?
Yes. So, if you had a summary of your message for today, what would that be?
My summary of my message would be, you know, root yourself in joy and in your relationships and building communities. It's really key.
Hmm.
Be strong
The,
together.
the last one that I have for you, if you have one, if you don't, no issue. Who should be your next speaker on this program?
Get John Graham.
I can work it out. I can work it out. Thank you for the suggestion. That will be interesting. And by the way, I'll ping you and connect you somehow for that conversation when it happens, if it happens, because there will be then exchanges about the reality in corporate US and the reality in Belgium slash Europe. So, okay, nice one. I'll make it happen. See, 3 minutes left. We're finished.
Good job. Yeah,
I will
yeah.
let you go. I still have a couple of points that I will address quickly now, but I'll let you go. And I
Okay.
really appreciate you for your time and for the work that you're doing. Success and happiness with Black by Us. And if I can be of a little help, one way or another, let me know.
Thank you, Gregory. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye bye,
Bye.
Dominic. Have a good day.